Okay, today is a meeting of the Oversight Committee. Apparently, our last meeting was February the 2nd, 2022. So we've got the minutes for that. I think it would do well to read the minutes. I mean, it's not going to take that long. It says, I opened the meeting at 2 p.m. Members present were Jake Gilbert, Joe Edwards, and Scott Willis. Jeremy Lawler was on the call. Jeremy's here in the flesh today. Okay, approval of meeting minutes. Jake Gilbert made the motion to approve the meeting minutes for November 10, 21. Scott Willis seconded. Vote 3-0. Should we call roll, Marlon, before we start on this?
We can.
Let's do it.
All right. Jake Gilbert.
Here.
Joe Edwards.
Here.
Scott Willis.
Here.
Okay, I'll continue. I stated there was a lot of information and suggestions in the review, so we were he was cherry picking. I don't know who he is, but I suppose it is me. The ones he felt should be accomplished first. Establishing a better working relationship with mayor, council, and clerk treasurer. I'm not sure that ever happened. One of the things that we did talk about was a off-site meeting with these folks, and it never got any approval. The next item was code of conduct for the mayor, council, and clerk treasurer, and that's one thing I do want to talk about today. The next thing is strengthen internal controls and internal audit functions. I'm a little disappointed that we don't have a state audit, but apparently there is not there's not an appetite to pay for an audit, which might be 60 or 50 or 60,000. I'm not sure. I do think we need it. I think we need an internal an audit.
You're talking about from a third party?
Yes, third party.
We discussed that when we first came on council.
Yeah.
Nothing's really happened with that. That's unfortunate.
Well, we named a committee, and the committee decided that it was too much money, and they kind of disbanded and let the state do the heavy lifting. The only trouble is the state doesn't do very much heavy lifting. They point out bad things, and that's about the end of it. Don't do much about it. First item discussed was strengthening internal controls. I'm going to bypass that. I stated they felt the internal controls had been established, but we needed to follow up, make sure they're being implemented and carried out. Volunteered to review the process of money handling documents, and I think we're pretty good on that. Followed per established internal controls. Jake stated that he had received a file from the clerk's office on the internal controls, and that would be a good starting point. Scott Willis stated he would like to look into lack of controls and develop a policy around expense reporting to make sure there is a receipt of proper documentation that's being approved by the appropriate person.
If you want, I can chime in on that real quickly on an update. So I met with Ms. Gozzard and her staff, and I think Jeremy and I actually had a phone conversation on this as well. And the reality of it is, I mean, we could try to codify an ordinance on this, but it's really, I see that more as a city clerk treasurer function and putting something in writing to micromanage that process. It just, after looking at all the details and the problems we've had, I just didn't think it solved any problems. So.
Okay. The next paragraph says, Ann Poindexter stated that per state requirements, a policy for internal controls should have been adopted, but may need to be reviewed and revised, but I don't know that was ever written. I made some preliminary calls to Noblesville and Fishers, never got any response, particularly. And I know Jake, if you ever get anything worked up on that, any document for internal controls.
The things that the clerk treasurer had forwarded me, yes, and also John Rogers originally. I mean, John basically gave me all the state's resources, and then Cindy gave me essentially their resources, and things are in place, probably could be updated. Even if that doesn't mean they're changed, but reviewed and updated. But that was not necessarily the request of the
One of the things would be,
clerk's office.
should this be a part of the employee's manual? And there's been some conjecture about who is in control of the employee's manual. And because Ann said that there needs, that per state requirements, a policy for internal controls should have been adopted. She said she agreed to contact Troy and see if all requirements, and she could go ahead and do this if we needed it done. So it's kind of up to us, and I'll move back to that after I read the minutes.
Mr. Edwards, if you don't mind, I'd just like to chime in. We have, as a city, adopted internal controls.
Did they?
Yes, we did.
Did they adopt a document specifying?
Yes, we did.
Okay, well, that problem's solved.
Okay, and I believe it is in the employee handbook. I'm not sure if the entirety of the policy is written there, but it does, it should be, because in the codification, it says to refer to the employee personnel handbook. So yeah, it is there.
Pre you, Marla, when I had met with Cindy in there, I just, if my memory serves me correctly, I mean, we went through them and talked to them. I met with Cindy for a good long time, and there was a comfort there. It just, maybe it hadn't been reviewed in X amount of time and could warrant a review, but that it was there, it was adopted, we had policies. So it was more about when would be an appropriate time for a review and maybe, I guess a further explanation or teaching, but that's kind of the conclusion we came away with when we did this after last year at this time. I had met with John actually before that, before the Baker-Tilly recommendations and all those things. I met with Cindy after the Baker-Tilly recommendations, came away with it's there. She and I just mainly talked about maybe there's a warranted to just for all of us to review it, that's all.
Sure, and State Board recently, it was since my employment, did a nice webinar on strengthening internal controls. And essentially, anytime you're working on a process or a flow through government, you really are strengthening your internal controls. So a good example was the capital asset policy that we did, where we outlined what the expectations were of the assets in each department. That won't be due until the annual financial report, but that's kind of coming up. So we have an upcoming appointment with Nathan Fox from O.W. Crone to help us with that. And then we had a really nice meeting, Cindy and I, with John and Jeremy last Friday to kind of strengthen up flow on the RDC claims. And even that is considered a process of internal controls. So while you guys may not have been as engaged in that process, I think as an organization that's constantly evolving. And so we're all working on it together.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, it's just a question of, where should this employee handbook, if that's where it is, to be rest? Does it rest in the control of the administration or in the control of the city council? So I think that's a question that may be answered this year prior to the new mayor coming in. I'm going to skip this other one, second-class city. Just didn't pass. It just didn't have the mustard to pass, so there's no sense to crying your beer. It may pass at another time, but it's not going to with this council. Okay, the last item has been to establish a better relationship between the mayor and the clerk treasurer. I think we already talked about that. Joe Plankus gave his input on why we need to feel, he feels we need to go to a third-class city. Linda Noss spoke on her reasoning as to why a third-class city should not be considered, so we've kind of been over that road. I simply stated that the public ought to be able to voice their opinion on that, and, you know, it was fairly evenly divided, I thought, pro and con. Okay. Did you all get the minutes? But, we need a motion to either approve or change.
Motion to approve the minutes from our last oversight meeting.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Jake Gilbert and seconded by Scott Willis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Pass 3-0. Okay, the next item, we were asked to review the policy of raises, and I think there's not much sense. Indiana has what's called a strong mayor system. Some people say hallelujah to that. Some people don't think so much of it. But what it is, what it is. When raises are given and how this affects the budget for 2023, our budget is fairly tight. And so in 2022 and in 2023, some raises were given, that's pretty much at the discretion of the executive of the city. The only thing that I would say about that is if you have a tight budget and you're crowding somebody else out of their ability to operate their budget or to give raises, if raises are desired, it makes it a pretty awkward situation, I think. And so I don't think there's a whole lot we can do about it, really. I don't know. What do you think, Jake? There's not a lot to be done about it. This is administrative control, and the only whip hand we would have is if at the end of the year, or as the year progresses, we find that there's going to be a deficit. We could probably apply the whip hand if we needed to, but you know, in a situation where there is not a deficit, I don't think that we need to worry too much about it.
Well, and I have not talked to Jeremy since our meeting, but I was under the impression that, and Jeremy, you can probably fill us in, but the increases that happened were in alignment with what they had committed to the council to do, and that we don't have an overage or an issue with that. Is that correct, or?
Yes, that's 100% correct, and I apologize if I miscommunicated to council. So the raises that were given in 2022 in December were specifically for and applied to the 2023 budget. The first pay period of 23 starts in December. Therefore, in order for that raise to apply to their first check, which comes on January 3rd-ish, it has to occur in December. The directors, who are the ones that are ultimately giving these raises and or promotions, are bound to the budget that was approved by council. So if Public Works gives a raise, it doesn't pull money from the fire department's ability to give a raise. They each have their own salary budgets.
I don't think there's any sense for us to get, that's the details of running a business that we don't see every day. We'll only see periodically as we go along. We need to be attentive to the details, but how it's done and if it's within the confines of what we've prescribed, I don't see that there's much to be said about it.
I agree with you. That is the under the authority of the administrative arm of the city and the jurisdiction of the directors to manage their own budgets. You guys get a quarterly budget report. You can track it that way, and always can get information from the clerk's office about the financial status of the city.
You guys have anything
I
else?
think that's well said.
Okay,
Moving on.
next thing and last thing, this will be a short meeting, is the idea of appointments. We create these things, and there ought to be a way to, the assistant clerk, Marla, gave me a kind of a rundown of all the things that the appointments are needed, well, I should say we need for the appointments. Some of them are city council appointments, some of them are mayor appointments. Most of them are either that. And we're up to date. It looks to me like in the very important ones, which is in Todd's area, if we did not have a properly appointed person on the planning commission, we could be sued in retrospect, for not having our paperwork done properly. Or if the appointment languished, does the person continue in service until, the appointment's made? I don't know. State law probably prescribes some of that. But some of it is state law. I go to the second one, the American Rescue Plan Committee. That is an ad hoc committee, basically, and it'll go away when these American Rescue Funds are distributed. And so there's no terms. I mean, they serve till it's done. The next one is the Board of Public Works and Safety, and the mayor has, he's on there. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll work through some of this. First off, I want to say the intent here is to get it right. Not be right, get it right. Do what's right, do what's legal, do what we're supposed to do. Sometimes that's a little more confusing than it seems like it should be because of overlapping statutes. So as you believe me, I am not legal and I do not pretend to be, but we all work hard. I think we should all have the desire, based on the potential consequences that Joe just made, or mentioned, but in addition to that, just to do things the right way for trust and transparency in our community and our city. So anyway, there's several boards and commissions on here, and the intent was to make sure that terms are lined up, terms are correct, termination dates, appointments, all of these various things. So first off, I want to give kudos to Marla Ayler, who has worked extremely hard on this issue to track a lot of information down. This is, I really have no idea how many hours she's poured into this, but a ton. So thank you, Marla. First off, thank you. Kevin has worked with us quite a bit here. Kevin was here for most of these appointments. Kevin's been here for a while. So thank you, Kevin, for all your time and effort as well, and answering emails and phone calls and correspondence and all those things. So Marla and Kevin have kind of been the key players in this as we try to figure things out. I have also talked to the mayor, talked to Jeremy, talked to Ann Poindexter, the council's legal representative, talked to Manny Herzog, city attorney. So a lot of talking. So here's where we are. This is not going to be finalized today. Our goal is to have this finalized by the next council meeting. I think that is hopeful. There's still a couple other areas where I think we may need to get some legal opinions together and so forth and so on. So this is basically a report out on where we are today Some of this is concluded, some of this is not. Some of the issues that we go through have already been addressed and are therefore agreed upon and fixed, and the records are now kept better. And, again, the clerk's office really under Marla and this project will have those records kept in a way that is more organized. We are asking the city, moving forward, that this becomes more public. We do believe you should be able to get onto the website and be able to see, well, who's on a board or who's on a commission. When does their term end? How long are terms? Information about the boards and commissions. All of that, I think, would encourage participation by people in our community, not the opposite. A lot of times people want to get involved and they don't really understand how all the opportunities that there are to get involved. I think just a more transparent look on our website and a better keeping of records on these boards and commissions, which can happen through the clerk's office, will benefit us all. So with that, getting off my soapbox, I'm going to go through some of these boards and commissions specifically. So the big one is the APC, the Advisory Plan Commission. So this is the most convoluted and cloudy of all of these. So essentially, there's different codes, again, that overlap. There's a 200 series of codes. It matters whether or not you have a park board or not. One thing we're going to pause at with right now is centered around a joinder agreement, and this is per Ann and Manny's discussions. So essentially this, we had a joinder agreement between our town, our township, and our county in 1977. The 200 series of code that governs the planning commissions came out in the 80s, and then 12-10-5 came out in 1995, and that applies to organizations that have a joinder agreement. So that part Ann and Manny have certainly agreed upon. Now it's just a matter of, I guess, reading through our joinder agreement, see if having a park board has anything to do with that or not. But essentially, our joinder agreement says that the only qualification for the APC is residency. 4-year terms and there's residency. In general, advisory planning commissions, there are rules and restrictions and code that govern maybe staggering of terms, the political party of appointees, and some other information. This is going to be put on pause until we can come to agreement about the joinder agreement that we signed, and that will be circulated today. So I just got that literally walking into the meeting. So the progress has been made. We've narrowed a lot down and come to a lot of agreement on terms and so forth and so on, which again was mainly the work of, well, almost entirely the work of Marla and Kevin. But the APC is the hardest one to get right, again, because various potentially applicable codes and laws and statutes. Joe already mentioned American Rescue Plan Committee and the Board of Public Works for safety. Those are, again, we will try to get all this information online for all of our listeners here. We had no qualms with those. Again, records should be up to date on that. The Board of Zoning Appeals, the BZA, the council just appointed Noble Hatfield. He is yet to be sworn. I'm correct on that, right, Marla? We need to get his.
I have not listened to the APC meeting recently. It's a better question for Kevin.
Okay. Kevin, do you know if Noble Hatfield has been sworn? We're under the we believe he is not, so we need to get him sworn in. His term began, I don't have my glasses, but I believe that says, or we appointed him our last council meeting. I know that, so we just need to get him sworn at the next planning commission meeting.
I believe that's correct. I don't think he's been officially sworn in for this term, so.
So obviously, we don't want people conducting business if they haven't been sworn. So if we could get him sworn, if we need to do something, let us know, but that's, we
Yeah,
can
and
communicate.
that's something we can do with the BZA attorney.
Okay,
Or facilitate through them.
Okay, so I'm asking you to make sure it gets done on the next one. Is that okay?
We can do that.
Thank you, sir. Civilian Fire Merit Board. So the Fire Merit Board has some strict qualifications, especially as it pertains to political party. This is one thing, and I don't know, Chief, if you may have some knowledge on this. One thing is, we're unsure that who is responsible to check a person's political party affiliation, voter registration, call on that. I don't know if that's the president, like Brian Kercheval, or if it's,
Yeah, that board, you know, I think there's a misconception of the Merit Fire Commission Board is run by the fire department. That is not in fact true. We just kind of help coordinate, establish meeting times, call for meetings and things like that. So they're a separate entity.
Yep.
And they're responsible for those in the elections and checking those affiliated parties, and that's not the fire department's responsibility.
so Brian Kercheval's the board president, so I'm
That's correct.
assuming that's where we should start.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Since you're in the audience, I figured I'd ask you, but that will be a call I'll make to Brian. Okay, thank you for that. Now, there's also some potential issue with this. We are, the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Civilian Fire Merit Board does have one person on both. Part of the Indiana Code for the BZA states that none of the members of a Board of Zoning Appeals may hold any other appointed office except for as permitted by Section 902 of this chapter in municipal, county, or state government. So that's an issue that I have not heard back
Well,
from,
actually,
that I've
you
addressed.
probably haven't seen it. Manny and Ann Poindexter both responded on that, and that doesn't apply for us. So we can cancel that one or check that one off. So.
That was at the bottom of that last email.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right, they did address that, didn't they? Okay, I'll reread that.
just one less one.
That also fell under the joinder agreement
Did. Yep, absolutely.
because it was part of the planning
Mhm.
commission. So essentially the same thing I said about the APC.
Yeah, and I think Ann concurred with that as well.
Okay,
She didn't like it, but she concurred that.
that's
that
what
was-
she said. Said it made no
was-
sense, but that if that's the law, that's the law. Okay. Okay, so the redevelopment commission, I believe we're all good. Thanks again for the hard work here. We have all the terms listed, agreed upon. The redevelopment authority, there is a member there who is also a member of our APC. So a potential issue is that APC, Advisory Plan Commission members cannot hold other office. But again, to the point we just raised, under that joinder agreement, the only qualification that is subjected to appointees from the APC is residency. So if that's the case, that would make that null and void. So again, we will finalize clarification on that. Right now, all I have is somewhat of an agreement between a couple of attorneys on an email and some other information. So maybe to be determined, but we will continue to check on that as well. Okay, we have the Westfield Economic Foundation, the Platt Committee. Those are both up to date, I guess. We have not appointed anyone, though, to the Westfield Economic Foundation in, I don't know how many years. I'm not sure if Jeremy or anyone has any thoughts or suggestions on that or any words. Okay, now there are two committees on here that include Dr. Mark Keene. Now, Kevin, you had emailed me back on that. I asked a specific question. My question was for the Liquor License Review Committee and the Riverfront License Review Committee. Was Dr. Keene appointed because he was a council member, or was he a council appointee? Would you mind answering that for the public, Kevin?
Yeah, and this would be pure going off of memory here. I haven't done any research into that specific question. I believe it was, the council simply has an appointment to each of those committees. He was their appointment. I don't think it was necessarily because he was a council member, although could have been. That's just who they chose to put on that committee.
So we
as
as
their
a
appointment.
council could review that about if we want to make a new appointee, but until we change him, he is the appointee by the council for both the Liquor License Review Committee and the Riverfront License Review Committee, correct?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, the Preservation Commission, the mayor told me yesterday that he expects to have these appointments made and brought to us by the next council meeting. And then the rest of the committees here: Community Development Corporation, Westfield Building Corporation, RFP Committee, Facade Improvement Grant Program Committee, New Builder Architectural Review Board, Impact Fee Bureau Board. There are no new information or issues with those board appointees. We may have some issues here with the library board. Scott, you're on that. I don't know necessarily what these issues are. Marla, maybe you could speak to this, or Scott.
They run a very tight ship at the library board. But, you know, sort of like, well, I'm building this list, I might as well put them on there because council gets an appointment. And looking on their website, it indicates that they have 2 appointments that are expired. Neither one come from council or the mayor, so it was more of a just note to the library board.
Yeah, the term limit is 4-year terms, so 16 years, and
Four
four
terms.
4-year
Okay.
terms. So nobody is termed out at this point.
Okay, then they might just want to update that on their.
I've reached out to Cheryl and asked her.
Yeah.
And you're right, I'm on that board, and when I got like 3 months out, she started, go get it done, go get the signature done, I need this. She's all over it,
Yep.
so. But I will make sure she's aware of that.
The last issue that I guess I didn't raise yet was for the Board of Zoning, for the RDC, the commissioners took their oath on January 17th, but those oaths have not been delivered to the clerk treasurer's office. Is that still the case, Marla, unless anything has happened since then? we met?
Yes, we have not received them yet.
Okay.
So I
So-
think it's really maybe working out processes, because Kimberly was here and notarized them, and I was here, and I know they were all sworn in. But since our office is the official record keeper, the way I read it is we are supposed to keep the oaths and any bonds that are issued on file, and so we don't have those, and just like them to be passed along. But the oaths kind of work into a larger question about, and it's just very hard to read because I'm not a lawyer and I'm reading law. And I did ask Manny, and I haven't really gotten an answer yet, what boards and commissions members need to take oaths and which ones need to be bonded.
Yeah. So that was my final thing is that Manny was not able to look into that yet. I did not ask Ann this particular question, but which of our commissions need surety bonds? So in the records, we do have records of some former appointees with surety bonds that we were able to pull up. But we're just not sure, and so we need some advice on legal on that. RDC, RDA, EDA, who needs bonded and who does not, we do not know. So on the to-do list here, that's one of the questions. So I guess things that need done, Kevin, we talked about swearing in. I am going to call Brian about the Civilian Fire Merit Board. We're waiting to close the circle here on the APC, which also, I think with that joinder agreement may affect also the RDA. And then we need to get an answer on the bonding, the surety bonds, and we need the oaths delivered from the RDC. That's 5 things right there.
Marla, did you say that Ann had written the state, well, per state requirements, an internal control document. Do we have that?
Yes, we have an internal controls document.
Who wrote it?
I'm sorry?
Who wrote it?
The State Board of Accounts wrote it. And then we adopted it.
We adopted their,
Yes, it's considered their minimum standards for internal controls, which was a requirement by some date in 2017. I think it was in July perhaps, and it was adopted at that time. But then anything that, again, that council does or that we do or that admin does to strengthen policy is considered strengthening those internal controls as long as it's understood. So anything added to the personnel manual is considered kind of bolstering those internal controls.
I'd like to thank Jake and Scott for the work they've done. I'm not running again, but I've still got a year on. I like to see things as clean as they can be. And there needs to be a way, and I'm not sure what the way is, to put people who request to serve on some of these boards and commissions, at least put their name forward to the proper authority. I've had several people ask me, how can I get on the BZA, or how can I get on the Plan Commission, or how can I get on this or that? And we need to have I don't know what that looks like to a person on the outside, never been on the outside.
Well, I actually have an answer for you on that. Chris Larson came in and was kind enough to teach me a software application that I did not know how to use called FormStack. So all day today, I've been working on building this FormStack application, if you will. It has a drop-down menu of all of these different boards and commissions where someone might have interest. I'm kind of following a different city as a template, but they'll provide their information, and based on their interests, they'll be able to click what boards and commissions they're interested in, up to 3, and then that'll be stored in a file, an electronic file within the city. So whenever appointments need to be made in the future, hopefully whomever's mayor, there'll be a nice stack of applications they can go through and make their considerations. So I think that'll be all done and figured out by about the time this all gets figured out and done.
So this is implemented, it's ready, it's working now?
I'm finishing the form, which then has to be
Okay.
loaded into the
Patience,
internet, where a portal will be created for the citizenry to go apply online.
You know, one of the things that the city of Bloomington does, in conjunction with their communications department, is when these board appointments come up, they do a city bulletin like they do. We do that as well in Westfield. But they do a city bulletin saying, hey, we're accepting applications for this board. Here's the job description of what it entails. If you're interested, please apply here. And just a way for the community to be aware of these things and you know, apply appropriately. So maybe that's something that Chris and his team down the road would be willing to do to add some transparency to the whole process.
Some of these boards don't meet very often. Some of them have a lot of activity and important activity. And I think it's wise that we try to limit the number of these boards that aren't going to have any activity, because people, I think they get the idea that that could be a dog and pony show or whatever, and that, you know, if they're never called on to give their advice, if that's what we want, or their assent or dissent to some action. Others there's more to do on them, so they would understand that. But we've got to be real careful that we don't create, you know, commissions on, you know, something that doesn't matter very much. That's easy to say, hard to do. So anyway, anything else?
Chris, on the website, so I understand form stack, I understand Scott's suggestion, but in terms of information about current boards and commissions, can we add all of these appointees, names and faces and term information and any information about it? Wherever that we don't have those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Super easy to add more content onto the website and create those boards, those commissions, and they just need to be added to the staff directory and assigned to those boards and commissions. So
So then the question becomes, who's gonna do that? So Jeremy, as I look at you, Marla. So who is, no, I mean, I don't mean, I assume Christopher's team is gonna do the actual website work. I mean,
not really.
so we gave you, so for example, Marla's spreadsheet here has everyone's names and terms, but if there's an explanation of what this commission does and so forth and so on, that's what I'm talking about. Who's gonna get you the information to put on the website's what I mean.
It would be a team effort. So once the list is finalized, obviously the IT department and/or OpenGov or whomever the appropriate body is will do the technical side of it. We'll have Kevin and the different, I guess, leads of these boards help write a description via the communications department that can then be uploaded. If that, I think, answers your question.
So for the finalization, maybe if Marla or I or both get the people with the terms, you guys will handle the descriptions. What else do we want on there?
I think names and term, a lot of cities will have pictures as well. And
Yeah.
maybe we want to do that, but it'll take a little bit, so we would probably upload that later.
And we do have, I'm sorry to interrupt you, that we do have, for many of them, who's on there. But we lack the termination dates and often a description of what, I mean, we all know what economic development, I think, does, or, community development, but it's not listed, but most of the cities do list that. I think there's a statute, I don't know where it is, but that says we should do that. So once this is decided,
Economic development, like the Department of Economic Development? Or
well, I meant community development, but
EDC?
we do have an EDC,
not the department, the board or commission description.
The commission is EDC, yeah, then community development taking care of APC and BZA. I mean, they're pretty good windows, if you will, in our website of who's on what, but again, it doesn't say when their term expires or who they were appointed by. And if you look at maybe one of our neighboring cities, for instance, I happened to look at Noblesville today, and it would say who was appointed, who they were appointed by, and theirs is very different than ours because it's 11, and some of those are department heads or people from certain departments. I think we can just be a little bit more specific to,
Yeah, we have no issue with that.
yeah. But I don't know how to do
Long-term, we got to
that.
think about the management and update of that. We don't really have a person that does that over on our side. In perfect world, there would be a person in the communications department that can manage that. From a records perspective, maybe it's best suited that the clerk's office update that portion. I don't know. But we can work through those
Great.
things however it needs to be.
It ought to
So-
be easy to find for the public and
Certainly. So what I'm hearing is name of the board, description of the board, name of the appointees, the group or person that appointed them, and their term limits, appointment and expiration. Yes, sir. I think we can accommodate that.
I don't know that there's any more business that needs to come before this group.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, is there a second for that motion? Motion to adjourn, yes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Am I done?
45 minutes.
Am I done saying?